Right, so we're there. We've got everything that we need now to create our KTaNE mod. So we need to start bringing some objects into our hierarchy. So if we go down to this little search box here, just above the project folder here, the mouse does this very nice thing where it gets bigger for me so it can show you where I'm pointing, and you want to type in component, or as much of component as you can. This is going to access the mod kit. One thing, actually, just to sidetrack, to check that you have got the mod kit in correctly. If you have, you will have Keep Talking mod kit up here at the top. So if you've imported the mod kit correctly, that will be there and you'll be able to configure your mod and stuff, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. So typing in component will bring up a few different things, and what you want is this one. So you've got a few options. You've got ones that look like they're spheres, you've got ones that look like they're squares, you've got ones that look like there's a hole cut out of it. You want this one here. It's called component puzzle background, and that is the prefab. It's called a prefab because it's a pre-made asset. It's a pre-made object that we can just click and drag into our scene, which is this thing up here, and that's literally what you're going to do. You're going to click and drag and drop. Now it'll look very, very small at the moment, and that's fine. Before we do anything else in terms of zooming in and getting a closer look, we need to reset the transform. So having dragged and dropped it in, come over to your inspector over on the right hand side, and you'll see the transform there. This little cog here, if you hit that and hit reset, it will default it to 0. It's very important that we do that, because when we bundle it later on, if it's not set at 0, it might be at a different place and not in the hole on the bomb, which is where we obviously want it to be. Having reset that, we can now zoom in on our component puzzle background. We can do this by double clicking over here in the hierarchy. We go to the hierarchy, our component puzzle background, which is there. We're going to double click it to zoom right in. And there we go. It's the first step of our mod. Now, from there, you might want to have a little change with the perspective. This little toggle thing here just controls which direction you're looking at your object or your scene from. So I start by clicking the middle to go from perspective to isometric. This gives us a clearer view. And then I hit the green bit on the top, the Y, the green Y, and it will show us a top-down view of our module. Now, the first thing you will probably notice at this point is that our module is upside down. This is, for some reason that I do not understand, it's always just come like that inside the mod kit. It's always upside down. So we don't need to worry about that too much, because again, we can go back to our handy-dandy transform over here. You want to hit the Y, the rotation Y-axis, and type 180, and that's just going to flip it around. Now what these do, these just rotate the different axes. So if I choose the X-axis, if I go 45 to show you a better angle, and just go around, you're going to see it's gone down at a 45-degree angle. You don't want to do that. You want to keep that at 0 and that at 180, and there you go. Another thing you can do while you're here, there's an animator component. If you just look down here, you've got transform, puzzle background, mesh renderer, and there's an animator that's attached to this prefab. Now, I'm not sure why there's an animator there, but there's no controller attached to it, and never is there. But you don't know what a controller is, don't worry, we'll get to that in a maybe later tutorial. So you can just right-click that and remove that component, because we're not going to use it. It's not necessary. So there we go. There is our prefab. But at the moment, it's just a block, it's just a bit of plastic. So we need to make this into something that's going to appear on the side of the bomb. So again, we're going to come back down to our project down here and our search bar, and we're going to type in this time button. If you type in button, you'll get it, but if you type in button masher, you'll definitely get it. Button masher, all one word. Now, this is a little shortcut, it's a little cheat if you like, but it helps when you're doing the setup work. And since we're going to cheat and we're going to keep this as our template anyway, it makes very little difference that we cheat just this once. Now, here's a button masher module, and this is another prefab. AshTheBash commentary. Reason for rotation of the model might be due to how it got exported by Steel Crate Games. Different 3D editors use different coordinate systems. That sounds like a very plausible explanation. As he's just commented, for novices, not too much to worry about, just as long as you've got it with the parameters that I've just explained right there. So, this button masher module, what this is a pre-set up module. It's all done and ready to go. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this and you're going to drag it directly into your hierarchy, which is over here on the left, and let go. And you'll see immediately I've got what seems to be a finished module. And yes, Ash, I don't know if you have any answers to River's question about why we need visible meta files. If you can have a look at that, that'd be great. Now, we don't want this module. We want to make our own module. But what we do want from this module is its pre-set up stuff. So if you go to the little arrow next to your button masher module right there and drop it down, there's a few things that are on there. These are things which are contained within the module that's already been built. And the two that we want to steal away from that are the status light and the component highlight, because they've already been pre-configured to the right place, the position, the transform, if you like, and also they've been set up with the highlight certainly has been set up with the right component. So if you shift click those two, it will select them both, and we want to drag it in, still in the hierarchy, out of the button masher module. Now it's going to ask you if you want to break the prefab. What you're breaking is this prefab button masher module, which we're not going to keep anyway. So yes, we want to continue with doing that. Once they're there, once they're out, you can take the button masher module and get rid of it, because we don't need it anymore. So now we've got our puzzle background, our status light, and our component highlight. You might be thinking, well, hang on, I can't actually see anything differently at this point. And quite right, you can't, because this one doesn't have anything on it until it gets into the game, and this one only has a filter. It doesn't have a renderer. It doesn't have anything to actually render in the space. But they are key components, and we're going to come back to them in just a second. But first of all, we're going to go back to our component puzzle background up here, and we need to add some components to it. Now, a component is generally a script or an object or something that you attach to this item so that you can tell it to do something. Actually, we don't want to do that. We want to do that in just a minute. But that point stands. The add component is where we're adding stuff, but we don't want to add it to our component puzzle background. We want to put all of these objects into something else. So before we do that, I'll explain why in just a second, but we're just going to do it first of all. Right click into your hierarchy. This is quite definitely not what I thought you'd look like. Your webcam is over the top of what's visible in the hierarchy view at the moment. Oh, good point, Ash. Yes, let me. That's a really good point. I think I've locked myself in place. Let me move myself to a more appropriate location. I don't know if that's going to be better or worse, because I'm going to be over the inspector there. Maybe the bottom left might be better. Let's go bottom left for now, and we'll see how we get on. Thanks for pointing that out, Ash. Asked you, were you expecting better or worse, I suppose is the question. Where was I? Yes, I was creating a bundleable item. So in our hierarchy over here, you want to right click and you want to go, this is more useful than the Unity Basics lessons. Thank you, Porky. You want to hit create empty. Okay, now that's an empty object, and you just want to make sure, mine has defaulted to it over here, but it's all set to 000000111. If not, just hit your little cog and reset it. And this is the thing that all of our other items are going to be contained within. So we want to call this whatever we want our module to be called. In this case, I'm just going to call it template. Now, our three objects, our puzzle background, our status light, and our highlight, these can be clicked and dragged onto the template, and you'll see that they all become little objects within the template. This is called the parent, the template, and these are called the children of that object, and that's how we refer to them, the parent and the children. The parent is always the more senior. So this, selecting the template, will essentially select everything else, whereas you can select them individually if you select the children down here. Now, one other step that you might or might not want to do, this is a personal preference for me, I'm going to create another empty object, put it inside my template, and I'm going to rename this ancillary. And it's into there, and again, just make sure your transform is all set to the default zeros and ones. I'm going to then take my three objects and put them inside ancillary. Why have I put them inside another object inside a bundleable object? Well, the reason for that is quite simple. If I'm making lots of complicated modules, I might have this one that says screens, and I might have this one that says buttons, and I might have this one that says stage lights, and I might have this one that says I don't know, iPad, and I might have this one. You see what I'm getting at? If you've got lots and lots and lots and lots of different things going on in a module, and you're bringing items in and off display, then you want to be able to separate them and get them really, really easily. So this is very much a preference thing, But that is how I'm going to keep them for now. I'm going to keep everything in ancillary. And this ancillary stuff is stuff that once you've done it, you can kind of forget about it, and it just sits there in the background, and we need it for the sort of function of the game. So, having set this up, this is where I now want to go to my add component, and I want to make sure that I've selected my template, my parent object. So I'm going to go over here to my add component, and there's a few things that I'm going to need to add to this. So I type KM, and I get a list of all these things. Anything that starts KM, I'm assuming the acronym is for Keep Talking ModKit, Keep Talking and being all one word. But all of these are the custom made ModKit components that we're going to add to our template object. And in the first instance, we are going to need 4. We start with KM Audio, we're going to add another one, and we're going to add KM Bomb Info. What those two are, they just are going to tell us if we want any sound, it's going to refer to this script here called KM Audio. If we need to get information about the bomb, such as edge work or number of batteries, which we'll get to in a bit, it's going to refer to this bomb info script. I'm going to add a third component, and this is going to be KM Bomb Module. This is the first one we're actually going to do anything with. This tells the code that this is a solvable module. It's not a casing we're making, it's not a room we're making, it's not a needy, it's a bomb module. So we want to give it a module type. I have a little formula that I do for this if I'm doing stuff. So for example, if I was doing something called graffiti numbers, for example, that's how I'd type it. No spaces in the module type, lowercase for the first letter and capital N for the start of the new word. Now that's a Unity standard, which you'll see a bit more about when we get into the code. If I was doing something with a definite article at the beginning, say the swan, I would call it swan. And then here in the module display name, that's what it's actually going to look like when it gets loaded into the game. So that would be called the swan. If that were graffiti numbers, that would be graffiti numbers with space. That's just the formula I have. Lots of people do it in different ways, and this module type is also linked in. It's not linked in, but I like to keep it the same as a module ID, which we'll get to a bit later on when it comes to compiling. Some people like to go, I know Timwi goes the bulb module. I know Space Wizard does SP Wiz, he done Mastermind, so he'd do something like that. Ash does, what's Ash done? Do tangrams like that. So this is a personal preference as to how you want to do it. For us right now, we're just going to call it template and template. In the grand scheme of things, this kind of doesn't really matter because we're going to be changing this because this is just for the template anyway. And the final box requires timer visibility. So if you're doing something that requires you to look at the timer while you're doing it, such as the button or the plunger button or the sphere or something, you can tick that box and it will always spawn on the side where the timer is. Now the final component we're going to add, these are going to become your friends, is a KM selectable. If you type this in KM, it will come up down there, KM selectable. Now a KM selectable is the thing that tells the game this object is going to be selectable by the player in the game. And now we've got quite a few options here. There's a few things here that I must confess I don't know a huge amount about, if anything. This one, in fact let's go through them in order. Parent. For this, because it is the parent object, it has no other parent, so we're going to leave that as blank. Children. Now the children object here is where all of your other buttons and things that you're going to be able to select and press on the bomb, they're all going to be listed in there. For now we haven't got any, so we can just ignore that. Is pass through we can ignore. Child row length, this is something to do with gamepad controllers that I've never quite managed to get my head around and generally just ignore, and I've not had any complaints about. That is not to say that that is completely ignorable. There's probably more to that than meets the eye, but I'm not going to go into it in this tutorial because I don't know. This one is an important one though, the highlight. If we hit this little circle here, we'll get a list of objects that have highlight components on them. Now, remember earlier on we brought in this component highlight? The reason we did that is because it's already got a highlightable script on it. So if we come back over here and we go highlight, we can select that object and it's already all pre-prepared in the right side. Mastermind was Eotol Space with the lights of Perspective Bag. Thank you, Ash, for the clarification. Adventure game in the 3D maze as well. Lovely. Yes, my not quite 100% on it when it comes to memorising mods, especially ones I haven't played. So that's basically it when it comes to setting up this this prefab right here. We've got our template, and now we've got our highlight selected. There's a couple more things we need to do before we can test this and make sure it's working. The first thing we need to do is actually create a bundle, a prefab bundle, and that's why we've got it inside this template object here in the hierarchy. Because what we can do, we can now drag this into our project down here. It's not going to do the big mouse thing. And this will automatically create a little prefab of it. And it'll show us all the objects that are inside. In this case, it's just ancillary. That'll get more interesting later on. Now, this right here, this thing that I've just created, this is the thing that gets bundled into the game. And that's done through the asset bundler, which is down here. We need to make sure that this template that we just created is set to mod.bundle. We hit that, and it will go into mod.bundle. That's not quite enough though. There's one more thing we need to do, because we're using the mod kit, which has got a load of examples in it, which are already set up with mod.bundle. So having set that to mod.bundle, select it again and press filter selected name. And you'll see all the things that are already set up with mod.bundle. We don't want any of those. So we're going to, apart from the one we just made, the template. So we're going to select all of those by shift clicking, except our template, which we want to keep, and then go to none. And it's immediately going to get rid of all of them. And now, select our template again and filter. That's the only thing in mod.bundle. So when we bundle it later on, that's what it's going to send out. So mod.bundle, hit the little X, and it'll take us back to our main folder. So there we have it. That is how to do the absolute basic setup. Now at this point you're going to want to make sure it works, and I'm kind of keeping my fingers crossed a little bit that it does. And for that there's one more thing we need to do to test it in game, and then test it in engine rather, and then we can test it in game. So let's go into our test harness folder in our project. You can also do this through the search meter if you just type test harness. And it's this blue box here. You've got blue fastest beep, and you've got a blue box and test harness. The test harness is the one you want. We're going to click and drag that into our hierarchy, not inside our template, but just above it, underneath the camera directional light, and there it is. Now if we want to hear sounds in game, we'll get onto this a bit later on, but for now all you need to do is drag it into the hierarchy and make sure it's there. River doesn't know what the child rows are for either. I think it's something to do with gamepad control. I'm not 100% sure. Because I want to live through that logic, it's super awesome. What happens when just busy with the stuff? Child rows are exclusively for gamepad support. Thank you for confirming that, Zach. Sorry, Zachmix. They define a grid of buttons which can be navigated with the up, left, right, down button joysticks. There we go. Ninja. I thought it was something to do with gamepad. It's never something I've concerned myself with, which maybe is a reflection of me, but as someone who doesn't play with gamepad, it's something I've never really been too fussed about. But there are other tutorials about that you can look into. So all of them, can't figure it out. I've got my manual done, but it needs formatting. Okay, Asu, that's cool. What we're going to do now is just check that this is working in Engine by hitting the play button. And if it is, look at that. We have a lovely highlight around our object. Now it's not going to do anything else at this point, because we haven't done anything else with it. But that's how you do the basic setup. The final thing we want to test, you should see the mouse. The final thing we want to test is to make sure it is working in game. So we're, once again, just in case we haven't, we're going to copy this down here. And that's how you save your prefab, by the way. You click from the hierarchy into your game object and let go. And that will update it. The final thing we need to do before we can build it is configure it. So we go to Keep Talking Mod Kit and hit Configure Mod. Now remember what I was talking about earlier with the ID. That's the bit. The ID is the bit that you need to give people if they want to include it as a mission in their mission packs, and it's also the bit that Porku uses for his training packs as well. So it's very important that you are very clear on what that is. The title we're going to call template. The description we're just going to leave blank for now because we're just doing this as a little test. We're going to drag it once more, now we've updated that. Save by Command S, and then we're going to build our mod kit. Keep talking mod kit, and I'm going to show you this way once, and thereafter I'm going to do it a different way. You click Build Asset Bundle. On the Mac, it's function F6. Does exactly the same thing. If we do this and we've done everything correctly and we've got it in mod.bundle, we hit Build Asset Bundle, it'll start whirring. River, I'm not sure actually if it means my modules wouldn't work with the gamepad. I assume it does mean that, but if someone wants to test that out and get back to me, that'd be really cool. Right, we've now built it. It doesn't look like it's done anything, but if we go down to our console, just down here, we'll see all the way at the bottom, build complete, output build template. Now I have my output folder set within the assets bundle as a build. You can change it to whatever directory you like. If you're testing a lot in game, you might want to set it to your KTaNE directory so it builds it straight into the KTaNE folder and you don't have to copy it every time. I'm going to show you a way to get around that. So, master template 2, this was the thing that we just created. And if we go to build, you see it's created this folder called build for us right here. We go to template, and that's our module. Template right there. So in there would have the manual and stuff, which we haven't done, but the mod.bundle is the key thing that wants to be there. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to take it to my KTaNE directory. I've got a KTaNE shortcut here. Because I'm on Mac, the directories are a little bit different, but generally this will be inside your Steam directory under Steel Crate Games Keep Talking. Now you'll probably have something that looks a lot like this. You have Keep Talking, log config, logs. You might have you won't have testing, and you might not have mods. If you haven't got mods, in fact, I'm just going to delete that. Move to trash. Yours will probably look a bit like this. You can just go new folder, mods, and this is how you load mods locally. And doing this means that you can test your mod in game without having to load 270 modules every time you want to go in and test one tiny change. Let's go in there, and we paste our template in. I've got a few in my testing folder. These are just some of my old modules, but one of the key ones that I do bring in for every single one is the zoom. And every time I copy and I paste, I don't click and drag for a reason that will become evident in just a minute. Once we've done that, we can load the game. So let's have a look and see what happens. Windows, Steam apps, common, keep talking, and nobody exposed. Thank you for that, Porky. And yeah, just on the gamepad thing, the main reason for not doing it is just mainly because I don't understand what it involves. It's not out of spite, and it's certainly not because I'm assuming no one is using a gamepad. It's more an ignorance thing on my behalf than anything else. Right, so we're going to go enable mods, and then close mod manager, and you see it's going to load the local mods that we've got in that mods folder. So we get into here, if we go free play, make sure you switch mods only on, put the timer up to what you want, and put your modules. I generally put it up to 11 to test what's going on, and we hit start. If we've done this correctly, there we go. Now notice I can't do anything with it yet, it looks a bit like Blind Alley. Just because it's a childless module, so to speak. It's also an impossible module to solve. But we can see that it is in the game, and it is working. Why are the highlights orange? That's a very good question, River. The highlights are orange because there are no children within the thing to select. If they were, it goes yellow when there are children within the high. Zeknix is on it already. It looks like, yeah. They go yellow if there are it goes orange if there are no children inside it, and it goes yellow if there are further buttons within the module. So yeah, that's how it sort of figures out the colour.